My friends, when you and I come together in an atmosphere of spiritual inquiry, it is always with the hope that something deeper than words will take place. For words themselves have no power. Thoughts have no power. The human mind, with all its noise and activity, cannot lead you into the peace, the harmony, the healing, or the abundance you have been seeking, and it is precisely this misunderstanding that has caused so much disappointment on the spiritual path. You see, for generations we have believed that the mind is the instrument by which life is changed. We have been told that if we think rightly, speak affirmations, hold the correct images, or discipline the mind sufficiently, we will reach spiritual fulfillment. But I say to you, that which begins in the human mind remains bound to the human mind, and the human mind is never the creator, it is never the source. The mind is an avenue of awareness, nothing more. It is not a power, neither for good nor for evil. It cannot heal you, it cannot supply you, it cannot save you from fear or from lack. And the more earnestly you try to use the mind to obtain spiritual results, the more you bind yourself to the very limitation you wish to escape. Now, I know that many have turned to mental practices with sincerity and devotion. Many have repeated affirmations, visualized outcomes, denied appearances, and attempted to manipulate thought. Some have had temporary results, yes, but temporary results are not spiritual law. Temporary results are not the revelation of God. They are merely the shifting of shadows on the screen of consciousness, while the light behind the screen remains untouched. And so I invite you now to consider something very gently, very quietly. If the mind is not the creative center, if the mind cannot bring forth harmony, then what is the purpose of all this mental labor we have been doing? Why are we weary? Why have we pushed and strained and affirmed and denied and still found ourselves standing in the same place, with the same fears, the same doubts, the same sense of separation? It is because you have been trying to reach the infinite with a finite instrument. You have been trying to touch the eternal with that which passes away. You have attempted to use the intellect to reach what can only be known in the depths of the soul. All spiritual truth begins with this recognition. The mind is not the self. The mind is merely the servant of the self. And as long as you believe that the mind can create, attract, or manifest, you will remain separated from the very presence that already is your fulfillment. When the Master said, "I can of mine own self do nothing," he was not speaking of weakness. He was revealing a great secret. The personal, human sense of self, including its thoughts, its willpower, its affirmations, has no authority in the spiritual realm. The human self is not the doer. The human mind is not the creative power. The Father within the infinite, invisible presence is the only power. And so, my friends, if you have struggled, if you have prayed for results, if you have worked with the mind and found yourself exhausted, let us lay aside that burden now. Let us set aside the belief that mental activity can open the door to God. For the door to God does not open outward, it opens inward, and it opens not through thought, but through silence. Not through effort, but through surrender. Not through affirming what you believe should happen, but through recognizing what already is in this moment. You can begin to sense a profound shift. You can begin to feel that the answer to your longing does not lie in mental striving, but in spiritual resting. You are not here to manipulate the universe into giving you peace. You are here to awaken to the truth that peace is already the nature of your being. You have not been seeking too little. You have been seeking in the wrong place. And so, as we begin this journey together, let us understand clearly mental techniques cannot give you what you seek, because what you seek is not a mental condition, it is a spiritual realization. It is the recognition of the presence that lives you, moves you, sustains you, and expresses as your very being. It is to this presence that we now turn, not with thought, but with awareness, not with effort, but with receptivity, not with desire, but with recognition. And as we proceed, you will discover why the silence, this holy living silence, is the only true doorway to spiritual transformation. My friends, as we proceed on this path of spiritual discovery, we must look honestly, tenderly, and without judgment upon the efforts that so many have made in their search for freedom. For I have met thousands throughout the years, students, seekers, sincere individuals who have labored with the mind until they were weary, exhausted, discouraged. They followed practices that promised abundance, healing, success, and spiritual power. And yet they remained unsatisfied, longing, still burdened with the same problems they hoped to escape. And so it becomes necessary not to condemn these efforts, but to understand why they fail. You see, when the world speaks of manifestation, it places the human mind at the center of creation. It says, think this and you will attract it. Visualize this and it must appear. Affirm this and the universe will obey. But all such teaching begins with a false premise, the belief that the mind is a creative force capable of shaping the spiritual universe. If you examine this practice honestly, you will see why it leads to exhaustion. Manifestation requires constant vigilance. You must watch your thoughts, correct your thinking, rebuild your images, guard against negativity. Push away fear. Maintain a mental picture at all times. Such a life quickly becomes a strain because the mind is a restless instrument. It cannot hold one idea without losing another. It cannot remain fixed on the absolute while wrestling with the appearances of the world. And so the individual becomes divided, torn between the effort to maintain a mental state and the fear that one wrong thought will undo everything. Can you see the impossibility of it? You are trying to lift yourself by your own bootstraps, trying to use the human self to transcend the human self. You are asking the mind to give you what only spirit can give. And in your earnest striving, you unknowingly deepen your sense of separation. Mental manifestation fails for another reason. It keeps you turned outward, always reaching for a condition, a result, an improvement in the picture of life. It persuades you that your good lies in something external, money, relationships, opportunity, health, and that you must work for it, pray for it, or mentally attract it. But Goldsmith's revelation, the revelation of the mystic path, declares that all good is already within you, not as a thought, not as a desire, but as the living presence of God that constitutes your very being. Think for a moment. If harmony is the nature of God, if love is the nature of God, if abundance, peace, and life itself are the qualities of the infinite, how could you, by mental effort, add anything to that which already is? How could you improve the infinite? How could you increase that which is boundless? And yet, This is what the practitioner of mental manifestation attempts to do. Improve what is already perfect by means of a limited instrument. This is why the manifestation approach leads to exhaustion. It is built upon a belief that you lack something, that you must attain something, that you must persuade the universe to deliver something. That belief alone is sufficient to keep you forever seeking. But the spiritual path is not a path of seeking. It is a path of recognizing. The moment you believe you must attract abundance, you have denied the spiritual fact that abundance is already the expression of your being. The moment you try to mentally create healing, you have accepted the lie that the I of you can be sick. The moment you try to manifest love, you have forgotten that God, the very substance of love, is your identity. And so, this mental approach becomes a circle without end. One desire fulfilled is followed by another. One demonstration is pursued by the next. One fear overcome is replaced by a new fear. One success brings a greater anxiety of losing it. There is no rest there. There is no peace there. There is only striving. And gradually, the seeker becomes spiritually fatigued. They grow tired of fixing life, tired of watching their thoughts, tired of maintaining affirmations, tired of trying to force the universe to respond. This exhaustion is not a failure. It is a turning point. For when the mind has reached its limit, when the individual has done everything they know to do and finds no lasting freedom, only then are they ready to hear the quiet whisper, "Cease your striving. The Father within doeth the works." Here, the spiritual journey truly begins, not where we manifest something, but where we relinquish all attempts to make life conform to our desires, not where we use God as a helper, but where we awaken to God as our very self, not where we shape reality with thought, but where we rest in the reality that already is. And so, the rise of spiritual exhaustion is not a tragedy. It is a blessing. It is the moment when the seeker discovers that the mind cannot lead them further. It is the doorway through which one steps into the vast and silent kingdom within the kingdom, where all true transformation unfolds without effort. This is the great turning point of the path, and it prepares us for the deepest truth of all. My friends, there comes a moment on the spiritual path when the seeker, having exhausted all mental effort, begins to sense a stillness that was not previously noticed. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It is simply there, quiet, unchanging, ever-present, waiting for recognition. This stillness is not the silence of inactivity. It is not the absence of sound, nor the quiet between thoughts. It is the silence of being itself, the living, breathing presence that exists beneath every appearance, beneath every condition, beneath every thought and emotion. It is in this sacred silence that all true healing takes place. You see, the spiritual universe is not composed of matter, nor of thoughts, nor of human beliefs. It is composed of spirit, pure, infinite, indivisible. And the activity of spirit is not noisy. It does not rush, nor struggle, nor strain. It unfolds gently, without effort, without resistance, without conflict. This inner realm, this silent dimension, is the place where the presence of God is tangibly experienced, not as an idea, not as theology, but as the very essence of one's being. It is here that the human sense of life fades and the spiritual reality of life reveals itself. But you cannot come into this silence by trying. Trying is of the mind. Trying is movement, activity, pursuit, silence is already here. It is the ground of your being. It is the nature of the I that you truly are. When we speak of healing, whether physical, emotional, financial, or relational, understand that healing does not occur because we have corrected a condition. Healing occurs because we have touched, even if only for a moment, this silent dimension of being, where there is no condition to correct in that realm. There is only God, and where God is consciously realized, discord cannot exist. This is the reason why the great mystics could sit quietly in the presence of disease and behold harmony. They were not looking at the appearance. They were beholding the invisible reality behind the appearance. They knew that the picture on the screen, whether pain, lack, or fear, was not the truth of being. The truth resided in the silence. And so, healing is never a change of the outer picture. It is a shift in consciousness. It is the moment when the personal sense of I, the frightened, striving, limited self dissolves into the realization that I is God in expression. When that recognition dawns, even faintly, healing is inevitable. This silent dimension is not far away. It is not hidden behind years of practice or layers of discipline. It is closer than breath. It is the awareness in which all thoughts arise, the background of every moment. It is the presence that knows your need before you speak it, because it is the very life living as you. To enter this sacred space, you do not push thoughts away, nor do you try to purify the mind. You simply turn toward the silence within, as gently as one would turn toward a friend. And in that turning, something shifts. You sense a peace that has no cause, a stillness that is not dependent on circumstances, a presence that does not come and go. This presence is the Father within. This silence is the activity of God. This stillness is the spiritual universe in operation. And as you rest in it, without asking, without seeking, without trying to achieve anything, grace begins its work, not your work, but the work of the infinite invisible. And it is this work that heals, restores, supplies, guides, and perfects. Do not mistake this for passivity. It is the greatest activity in the universe, for in silence, the divine self is revealed. In silence, the hypnotism of the senses is broken. In silence, you awaken to the truth that your life is not a personal struggle but a divine unfoldment. As you begin to touch this inner realm, you will discover something truly remarkable. The more deeply you rest in silence, the more harmoniously life unfolds without your interference. What seemed impossible becomes possible. What seemed blocked begins to open. What seemed broken begins to heal. But none of this occurs because you made it so. It occurs because you allowed the presence to reveal itself. And so, my friends, all true healing takes place in the silent dimension of being, in the recognition of the presence that has always been there, waiting only for acknowledgement. As we continue, we will explore how to abide in this presence, how to rest in it, how to practice it not as a technique, but as a way of life. My friends, as we enter more deeply into this path, let us speak now of what I have called practicing the presence, and let us approach it gently, for it is not a method, nor a ritual, nor a discipline of the mind. It is not something you perform, nor something you master through repetition. It is not a technique to get God to act, because God is already acting as the very life of your being. No, Practicing the presence is the quiet inner recognition of what already is. It is the resting in the truth that the presence of God is here, within, closer than your own breath, the very essence of your identity. When I use the word presence, I am not referring to a distant deity. I am not speaking of some higher power outside the universe. The presence is the infinite, indivisible life which expresses itself as your consciousness. It is the spirit that is the substance of all form, the intelligence that is the source of all harmony, the love that is the fabric of all relationship. To practice the presence is to turn inward, not to the mind, but to the source of the mind. It is to acknowledge, in a moment of quietness, that underneath every thought, every feeling, every appearance, there is one life, one power, one presence, and that this presence is the I of your being. When the Master said, "I and the Father are one," this was not a statement reserved for him alone. It was the revelation of a universal truth. The I that you are is not a human self, but the presence of God individualizing as you. And so practicing the presence means remembering this truth during the seemingly ordinary moments of your. It is not a matter of speaking sacred words. It is not the repetition of a phrase. It is simply a turning, a gentle inward shift in which you acknowledge the presence is here. God is the life of me. The I that I am is the infinite, invisible. This recognition may last only a second, but that second is enough, for in that moment, the personal sense of self loosens its grip, and the true self shines forth. In that moment, fear has no foothold, because you are no longer seeking God, you are dwelling in God. You are abiding in the realization of oneness. To practice the presence does not require withdrawing from the world. It does not require long hours of meditation or isolation. It requires only the willingness to pause inwardly and step out of the belief that you are a personal mind operating in a material universe. Think of it this way. The presence is always here, but we are seldom attentive to it. We are absorbed in activity, thought, emotion, reaction. Practicing the presence is the act of remembering what is true behind all these appearances. Perhaps you are driving. A moment arises. Be still. Perhaps you are preparing your meal. A moment arises. Turn inward. Perhaps you are speaking with another. A moment arises. Remember the presence, shining as both of you. These moments, though brief, accumulate. They soften the ego. They dissolve fear. They lift consciousness out of its human sense and into the intuitive knowing of the infinite. And gradually you discover that the presence is not something you visit. It becomes the atmosphere in which you live. Now, I must tell you something important. If you try to practice the presence to change a condition, you have missed the essence. The presence is not a tool for solving problems. It is the truth of your being. And as you know this truth, the problems dissolve, not because you changed them, but because you ceased believing in their power. In a moment of silent recognition, the veil of the personal self thins. You sense a peace that has no cause. You feel a warmth that is not emotional but spiritual. You recognize a life living itself through you, and in that recognition, the spiritual law takes over. You do not have to make the presence do anything. You do not have to coax it, guide it, or instruct it. It knows its own business. It is harmony. It is abundance. It is health. It is peace. Your part is only to recognize it, to acknowledge it, to rest in it, to dwell silently in the assurance that the presence goes before me, the presence accompanies me, and the presence is the essence of all that concerns me. This is the true meaning of practicing the presence. Not activity, but awareness. Not effort, but surrender. Not seeking God, but knowing that God is the very life that is living you. As we continue, you will see how this simple recognition becomes the most powerful force in your experience, changing not only the inward state, but the outward expression of your life. My friends, when we speak of the activity of the silence, this inner resting in the presence, you may wonder, how is it that simple awareness, without effort, without intention, can transform the outer circumstances of my life? And the answer is this: the outer world is not a cause, but an effect. It is not the source of your experience, but the expression of your state of consciousness. Everything that appears in your life, your relationships, finances, health, opportunities, challenges arises as the outpicturing of consciousness, not the personal human consciousness filled with fears, history, opinions, and beliefs, but the deeper consciousness, the one which is the presence and activity of God. You see, we have long believed that we must change the outer picture in order to attain harmony. We try to fix the body, correct the finances, improve our relationships, and arrange the world to fit our expectations. But the spiritual path reveals that all such efforts are in vain. The outer picture is nothing more than a shadow. It has no substance of its own. And no matter how you struggle to rearrange that shadow, it continues to reflect the consciousness behind it. This is why practicing the presence becomes the most powerful work you can do, because it shifts consciousness itself. And when consciousness shifts, the picture must shift also, without strain, without force, without manipulation. Consider for a moment a simple illustration. When the sun rises, darkness does not resist. It does not argue. It does not fight for survival. It vanishes simply because light reveals itself. So it is with the presence. Fear dissolves in the presence not because you chase it away, but because the light of truth renders it powerless. Lack dissolves not because you acquire more things, but because you awaken to the fact that abundance is the nature of God, and God is the substance of your being. Illness dissolves not because you treat the body, but because you come into contact with the life that cannot be sick. All spiritual healing is the revelation of what already is, not the creation of something new. And this revelation occurs only in silence. Now, let us go deeper. The silent practice rewrites your reality because it removes the false sense of I, the personal ego that believes it must manage life. When you enter the silence, even briefly, the personal I begins to fade in its place. The spiritual I, God expressing as your very self, comes to the foreground. And where the spiritual I is acknowledged, harmony flows as naturally as the tide without your effort. You may think, but surely I must do something to change my circumstances. No, my friends, that is the illusion that binds humanity to suffering. When you try to change the picture, you are operating as the personal self. When you rest in the presence, you are permitting the infinite invisible to reveal itself. And the infinite invisible does not need your instruction. It simply needs your recognition. The moment you enter the silence, you are stepping out of the world of appearances. You are stepping out of fear. You are stepping out of the belief that anything external has power over you. In that moment, you are returning to your true home, the realm of spiritual reality, where only God is power, only God is substance, only God is law. From this inner center, the outer experience begins to align with the truth you have recognized, not because you willed it, but because you removed the obstruction, the belief in a self apart from God. Let us be very clear. The presence does not improve your human life. The presence reveals your spiritual life. And as this revelation unfolds, the human picture harmonizes of its own accord. It may appear as new opportunities, improved health, restored relationships, or financial sufficiency. But these are not the product of your effort. They are the natural expression of a consciousness in which God is realized. This is why the silent practice rewrites reality. Not because silence is a technique, but because silence allows the false sense of self to fall away. And when the false falls away, the true stands revealed. And what is true is always harmonious. Remember this: you do not bring harmony into your life. Harmony is already here, hidden beneath the noise of the personal mind. When the mind grows still, the harmony that has always been begins to flow into expression. This is the effortless way, the way of grace, the way of the presence lived and realized. And this, my friends, is the foundation upon which the entire spiritual life is built. My friends, there comes a moment in every sincere seeker's life when a profound inner shift begins to occur, not by struggle, not by discipline, but by grace. And this shift is what I call the great reversal, the turning away from human effort and the turning toward spiritual rest. From the moment we enter this world, we are taught to strive. We are taught to make something of ourselves, to achieve, to acquire, to correct, to control. Even on the spiritual path, this conditioning follows us. We believe we must improve our thoughts, elevate our emotions, purify our desires, and discipline our minds. And all of this, sincere though it may be, keeps us rooted in the belief that the human self has a task to perform. But the great truth of the spiritual life is that the human self can perform no spiritual work. The human mind cannot lift you into the awareness of God. The human will cannot open the doors of the infinite, and the human ego cannot enter the kingdom of heaven, for it has no existence in the realm of spirit. The great reversal begins when you perceive the futility of trying to use the personal self to reach the divine. In that holy moment, something in you surrenders, not in defeat, but in awakening. You see, for the first time, that the one who has been striving has never been the true self at all. It has been a shadow of identity, a construct of memory, fear, desire, and conditioning. And when this false identity loosens its grip, even slightly, you begin to sense a deeper I, the I that does nothing, yet all things are done through it. The I that does not strive, yet harmony unfolds in its presence. The I that does not seek God, because it is one with God. This realization is the beginning of spiritual freedom. Let us understand it clearly. Human effort operates from the belief that something is missing. Spiritual rest arises from the realization that nothing is missing. Human effort tries to acquire the good. Spiritual rest recognizes that the good is already present in its fullness. Human effort attempts to correct appearances. Spiritual rest knows that behind every appearance stands the perfect activity of God. The more you struggle, the more you affirm the power of the problem, the more you rest the more you reveal the power of the presence. And so the great reversal is not a new effort you must undertake. It is the relinquishment of effort. It is the willingness to step aside and let the infinite invisible govern, guide, and unfold your experience. This is why the Master said, "Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." What is this easy yoke? It is the yoke of surrender. It is the resting in the Father within who does the works. It is the letting go of the personal sense of responsibility for life and the quiet recognition that life is living itself through you. In this reversal, you cease to live from reaction, from fear, from desire. You begin to live from presence. And soon you discover something extraordinary. The more you rest in the presence, the more life unfolds in perfect order. Without effort, solutions appear. Without struggle, relationships harmonize. Without planning, opportunities arise. Without force, the right actions become clear. This is not passivity. This is the highest form of activity for spiritual rest. Is not the stillness of inaction, it is the stillness of alignment with the infinite. In this stillness, you become a transparency for God to express, and that expression is always intelligent, always loving, always harmonious. Let me say this plainly. When the great reversal occurs within you, you do not become inactive. You become non-reactive. You do not withdraw from life. You enter life more fully, but without anxiety. You do not stop acting. You stop acting from fear and begin acting from grace. What we call miracles are simply the natural functioning of life when the personal self is no longer obstructing the flow of the divine, and all of this begins the moment you allow yourself to rest, not in resignation, but in recognition. The presence knows what you need before you ask. The presence knows how to guide your steps. The presence is the substance of your health, the source of your supply, the peace of your relationships, the direction of your path. And when you cease trying to manage life, you discover that life has already been managing everything perfectly. This is the great reversal. From effort to rest, from doing to being, from striving to surrender, from personal sense to the infinite presence. And once this reversal takes place, the spiritual journey becomes one of ease, of grace, of quiet unfoldment, for nothing is left for the human self to accomplish. God becomes the only activity, the only power, the only presence, and you simply rest, trusting, listening, abiding. My friends, let us now come to the heart of this journey, the silence, not the silence created by closing the door, not the silence of withdrawing from activity, but the silence that exists beneath all sound, beneath all thought, beneath all striving, the silence that is the presence of God. Many have asked, how do I enter this silence? And I must answer with great gentleness, you do not enter the silence by doing anything. The silence is not a place you reach. It is the truth of your being that you uncover. It is not attained by effort. It is revealed by surrender. Let us begin very simply. Become aware, right where you are, of the simple fact that you exist. Not the thought, I exist, but the awareness of existence itself. Just that, without words, without analysis, just the quiet recognition, I am. Before any thought arises, before any desire appears, before any concept of good or bad, right or wrong, there is this pure, silent awareness of being. That is the doorway. That is the presence. That is the I. That is one with God. Do not attempt to hold this awareness. Do not try to deepen it. Do not attempt to force the mind to be still. Simply rest in the fact that something within you is already aware, already present, already alive. This inner awareness is not the human mind. It is the infinite invisible shining through the mind. It is the life of God expressing as your consciousness. Now, simply be with this awareness. If thoughts arise, let them come. If emotions surface, let them be. Do not chase them away. Do not try to quiet them. Allow them to pass like clouds drifting across the sky. You are not the thoughts. You are the awareness in which the thoughts appear. You are not the emotions. You are the presence that observes them. You are not the body. You are the life animating the body. In this realization, the mind begins to settle naturally, not because you forced it, but because you have withdrawn your belief from it. The mind becomes like a servant who, seeing that the master has ceased issuing commands, grows quiet. Now, without words, without concepts, acknowledge the presence not as something to be summoned, not as something you must attain, but as something that is already here. Perhaps you sense a softening around the heart. Perhaps you sense a spaciousness within the mind. Perhaps you sense nothing at all. Do not measure the experience. Do not try to judge it. The presence is not an emotion. It is not a sensation. It is not an experience you feel. It is the truth of your being. Sit in this inner posture of receptivity, even if only for a few breaths. Let the presence reveal itself. Let the silence speak its own message. For the still small voice of God is not heard with the ears, nor grasped by the intellect. It is sensed as a gentle assurance, a quiet knowing, a peace that is not of this world. This, my friends, is entering the silence. It is not a meditation technique. It is not a spiritual exercise. It is the return to your true self. It is the recognition that beneath the noise, beneath the activity, beneath the personality, there is a vast, boundless awareness in which all things arise and dissolve, and that awareness is the presence of God. As you rest here, something beautiful begins to happen. The personal self loosens, the mind unburdens, the heart opens, fear begins to melt, and you feel not emotionally, but spiritually, a sense that everything is already all right. For in the silence, you come face to face with reality, not the reality of appearances, but the reality of being, not the reality of problems, but the reality of presence, not the reality of effort, but the reality of grace. If you remain here only a moment, you have touched eternity. If you return here daily, your life will be transformed, not by your doing, but by the activity of the infinite taking place within you. Let this be understood clearly. You did nothing. You accomplished nothing. You made no effort. You merely stepped aside and allowed the presence to reveal itself. This is the entire secret of the spiritual path: to rest, to listen, to be, and to let God be God in you. My friends, as you begin to taste the silence, even briefly, you will notice something remarkable. The silence does not stay in the meditation chair. It follows you. It accompanies you into the day. It permeates the ordinary moments, The simple tasks, the conversations, the relationships, the work you do quietly, invisibly, like the fragrance of a flower. And soon you discover that spiritual realization is not confined to sacred moments. It becomes the very atmosphere in which you live. This is what it means to live the truth. Living the truth is not a matter of repeating statements or applying principles or carrying spiritual ideas into your activities. It is not a practice of forcing yourself to stay positive or to deny the negative. Living the truth means abiding in the awareness of the presence behind all appearances. It means remembering, again and again, that the I which lives your life is not the personal sense of self, but the infinite invisible, the presence of God made manifest as you. Let us see how this unfolds in the practical moments of life. Suppose you face a challenge at work, a difficult decision, or a situation laden with pressure. The human tendency is to react, to analyze, to worry, to predict outcomes. But when you are living from the silence, there arises a pause, a moment of turning inward, a moment in which the presence is acknowledged, even if silently. The presence goes before me. The presence is my intelligence. The presence is the action taking place here. And in that moment, fear loses its momentum. Confusion begins to dissolve. You find yourself guided not by reasoning or calculation, but by an intuitive clarity that comes from a deeper place than thought. The decision you make carries the imprint of grace, not strain. Or perhaps you are dealing with another person, someone who irritates you, or challenges you, or misunderstands you. The human self reacts. I am hurt. I am angry. I am offended. But when you are living the truth, a different realization arises. The presence that I am is the same presence appearing as this individual. The Christ of me beholds the Christ of them. And in that recognition, judgment falls away, compassion arises naturally. And often, without a word, the relationship begins to shift. This is not because you changed the other person. It is because you ceased reacting from the personal self and allowed the presence to see through you. Let us look at health. When symptoms arise, the human reflex is to identify the body as the self. I am sick. I am in pain. I am weak. But when you are living the truth, there is another awareness beneath the surface. The I that I am cannot be sick. The I that I am is spirit, whole and complete. The symptoms may appear, but they are not the truth of my being. You do not deny the appearance. You simply refuse to identify with it. You rest in the presence. And in that resting, healing begins not necessarily because the body changes in that moment, but because your consciousness has shifted from the mortal sense to the spiritual fact. And where the spiritual fact is acknowledged, harmony follows. Look also at supply. The world teaches that supply comes from jobs, investments, people, or outer conditions. But when you live from the silence, you begin to see that supply is not something that flows toward you from the outside. Supply flows from the withinness of your being. It is the expression of the infinite source that is the I of you. When you rest in this truth, fear of loss begins to fade. Anxiety about the future loosens. You make decisions not from desperation, but from the calm assurance that the presence is your sufficiency in all things. And often, supply comes through channels you could never have imagined, not because you struggled, but because you trusted. Living the truth also transforms your sense of purpose. You no longer ask, "What should I do with my life?" Instead, you ask, "What is the presence unfolding here?" You cease trying to manufacture meaning and begin allowing meaning to reveal itself. You stop planning your life on the basis of personal ambition and begin letting the infinite express its purpose through you. And so your actions become more inspired, more harmonious, more aligned with the rhythm of spirit. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, doing the right work, not because you arranged it, but because the presence opened the way. This is the effortless life, not a life without activity, no, but a life without strain, not a life without problems, but a life in which problems do not frighten you, not a life without responsibility, but a life in which responsibility is met with grace, not anxiety. When you live from the silence, you discover that the presence is not something you visit from time to time. It becomes the center from which you live. It guides your steps, fills your words, inspires your actions, and sustains your peace. And gradually, the old sense of life as struggle, life as fear, life as effort, falls away. You awaken each morning, not to a day of tasks, but to a day of unfoldment. You walk through each moment, not as a personal self, but as the transparency through which God expresses. You rest each night in the assurance that the presence has lived your day and will live your tomorrow. This is living the truth. This is the fruit of silence. This is the life that unfolds when you surrender the personal self and let the presence be the doer. My friends, as we come to the close of this journey together, let us gather everything we have seen, everything we have touched, into a single realization. There is only one presence. There is only one power. There is only one life. And that one is the I of your being. From the beginning of this path, you may have believed that you were seeking something outside yourself, seeking peace, seeking healing, seeking God. But as you have traveled inward, as you have entered the silence, as you have surrendered the personal sense of self, you have discovered that the very one you sought has always been the one who was seeking, the God you prayed to, the source you longed for, the love you reached toward, was the very essence of your being. The spiritual journey is not a journey of becoming. It is a journey of remembering what was never lost, remembering who you have always been, remembering the presence that has lived your every breath, guided your every step, sustained your every moment. You are not returning to God. You are awakening to the truth that you never left. Let us reflect quietly now. Every attempt to heal yourself, every effort to improve your condition, every struggle to reach for something more, all of these arose from the belief that you were separate from the infinite. But now you understand. Separation was the dream. Oneness is the reality. When you rest in the silence, you feel this oneness, not as an idea, not as a philosophy, but as the living presence of God within you. It is the gentle assurance that all is well, and all has always been well, even when appearances declared otherwise. My friends, never again place your faith in the outer world. Never again believe that circumstances have power over you. Never again imagine that your good lies in people, things, or conditions. Your good lies in the presence. Your peace lies in the presence. Your healing lies in the presence. Your abundance lies in the presence. Your entire life is the unfoldment of this presence. And this presence is the I that you are. If ever you feel fear, return to the silence. If ever you feel lost, return to the silence. If ever you feel lacking, return to the silence. If ever the world seems overwhelming, return to the silence. Not as a technique, not as an escape, but as a recognition that the silence is your true home, the home of your real identity, for the presence will meet you there, not with words, not with visions, but with a peace that surpasses understanding, a love that needs no explanation, a wisdom that guides without effort. Let this be your final knowing from our time together. You do not walk this path alone. You have never walked alone. For the presence that walks beside you is the presence that walks as you. And so, when you rise from your chair, when you return to your work, when you meet your family, when you enter the world again, do not leave the silence behind. Carry it with you, softly, gently, until the boundary between silence and activity dissolves, and you realize that all of life is lived in God, and God is lived as you. Let this truth rest in your heart. The I that I am is the infinite presence expressing itself. There is nothing to fear, nothing to fix, nothing to attain, only the continual unfolding of the one life that is your life. May you abide in this knowing. May you rest in this presence. May you walk in this light. And may the silence reveal to you, moment by moment, the fullness of who you truly are.